We're here in the 100-acre wood in Wakefield, Quebec on a beautiful spring day. I'm Lori Goff, and I'm involved with some others in trying to save this woods from development, trying to raise money for a land trust to purchase it. I'm here with my husband, Rob McCart, who is a forest ecologist, and with Paul Hetzler, who many of you might know if you read the Wakefield News, because Paul writes daily pieces on the hidden, fascinating life of trees and other aspects of the ecosystem. Paul is an arborist with an incredible vast knowledge. He's like a walking encyclopedia of all things forest related. We asked Paul how species differ in different areas of the forest.
That fairly wet region there, and so that somewhat limits the diversity. So not all trees are really tolerant of wet feet. So a lot of soft maple I'm seeing. Right behind Lori is the yellow birch. They can tolerate wet also, and then beyond that tree is hemlock, some other hemlocks. Again, these are all trees that they don't require wet, but they certainly are tolerant of it. Balsam. We're getting it a little bit drier, more, better drained. So we still have some balsam, some soft maple, but I'm seeing a lot of white pine coming in. That's a species that just isn't very happy having wet feet. So, we're changing composition a little bit here. Great. One thing that caught my eye is sunshine in here. So you see there has been some blowdowns, and we have some old hemlock and pine that blew down here. It's kind of the natural course of things, So there's a lot of bedrock at grades. Most of these are shallow rooted, but that really opens it up for something like now we see red raspberries, and there are other species able to kind of take advantage of the light here. Just interesting to see the succession. So Rob, you asked, well, how old is it, and is this considered a climax community? Even a climax community is always, has a dynamic element like this. You have open patches, and then you have more dense shade. So I guess little known fact about most forests is they're even aged. So, we look now and we see trees that are vastly different diameters, even among the same species. And you think, these are, if we cut down, so many, there's an idea that, if we cut down the big trees, these little trees will have a chance. But they're, a lot of times, most of the time, they're little because of genetics. They're just not as vigorous, they're not as, efficient at photosynthesizing, for example. And so a danger of, if you own a woodlot, is to say, have a logger say, we'll cut down the big ones and these little ones will have a chance to just pop up. Well, the little ones are inferior genetics. Right. What you really want to do if you have a harvest, which I'm not against harvests, but you need to leave some of the nicest trees, for seeds later, because they're the top, they're probably of much superior genetics. It's like having a... So one of the neat things about the purple flowering raspberry, it's actually quite beneficial for pollinators because it's the only raspberry that flowers all season long. So it has it looks almost like a tea rose, a little pink purple, if you imagine, a little pinkish blossom, a very small fruit, but there aren't you can't get baskets loads of them because they're just blooming all season long. But it's gorgeous to look at. But certainly the pollinators really appreciate it right up till almost till frost. They're making flowers. And then there's elderberry here. So this is the red. This is the earlier species. So it is going to be in the early part of summer. It's going to be ripe, and the birds and other wildlife are going to be eating that. There's another species of elderberry that's native also, and then that's later. And then right here, so we have fruits and nuts. So we have soup is next, I suppose, but these are the fruit and nut section. So this is beaked hazelnut. It's native. You'll see these shrubs, kind of all over the place in certain locales. They get maybe between 2 and 3 meters tall. And they make a really nice little hazelnut that is actually edible, but if you can beat the chipmunks to them.
Really?
And then down here, right next to it, if that wasn't good enough, we've got a serviceberry, or
Okay.
Amelanker, whatever you want to call it, Saskatoon. They have more names than a convict or something, right? So they're always changing their. But yeah, so this is something that's sun loving, and so this is good. Well, we have a little bit of a rock outcrop. There's not going to be a lot of forest here, so maybe we'll get a little Juneberry shrub here. There's actually black cherry here as well, which is right next to it. I don't see any mature black cherry, which I'm a little surprised, but it's just another species that's greater diversity. It's important for pollinators, important for wildlife, so the whole bit. So it's kind of it doesn't look like much, but it's a nifty little area here where there's a lot of, I guess you'd say, food crops. And speaking of food crops, so right on top of this rock is a skinny little maple tree that has this full of seeds. It looks kind of different than the other maples. That's a mountain maple. That's another species, but again, just diverse. The seeds are drying now, and they're going to disperse. And again, you've got all kinds of small mammals and birds that are living off of that. It's an understory tree. It's about as tall as it ever gets. It's not going to be a big tree, but it's just cool to see this kind of diversity in a really small area.
So, Paul, how would you see this forest changing from how it is now, or how it might be in a land trust where it would be protected, versus what it would look like with some development occurring here?
Right, and part of that might depend on what the development looks like exactly. But I mean, anytime that there is there needs to be a roadway built somewhere or several, and then you need to have a building site envelope cleared out, and these things fragment forests, I think, more than we realize. So as I was mentioning before, the forest is already dynamic. There's already patches of sunlight, patches of dense shade. There's already it changes over time. There are slow changes that just help the ecosystem to adapt itself. It's a self-optimizing is what it is. It's but then if we go and fragment it, what folks don't think about is your building lot. That's not all the trees that are going to die. I'm sorry to say. So there are trees along the edge that no longer have. They're no longer sheltered, and some trees are going to blow down. I looked at a site yesterday, and I went down near the river to a beautiful lot, and it's obvious the person just really must value the trees there. And I told the gentleman I was with, like, well, you see all these trees? They're dead. They weren't dead at the time. They haven't. It takes them a few years to get the memo that actually they're dead, because they just put fill. It'd be like putting this much fill up to it. The roots aren't going to breathe, and come 3, 4, 5 years, they're going to decline. 10 years later, there won't be a large tree on that lot. There will not be on that particular lot any mature trees. Okay. So as we were just discussing, or as I was just laying out, there are certain species that are under unprecedented and just monumental strain. I don't even like to talk about it, and it makes me sad, and there's not anything that we know that we can do. So white pine, sugar maple, iconic species of the region, are under phenomenal strain. They've never seen this before. We know they've never seen this before. Their recent studies have shown that they are more stressed than at any time in probably their evolutionary past. So makes it all the more important to preserve contiguous, unbroken forest tracts. What these trees don't need is another stress because there's the road cut near their roots, or
Right.
because there's more disturbance. There's fill brought in or whatnot. So it is essential to leave places like this. So we have some of our forest. Our forest is going to change. There's no two ways about it. We know, well, it's been changing since the glaciers, right? but it's been relatively stable for a few thousand years. It's changing now. It's in a period of change. We need to. This is resilience. Leaving this untouched is resilience. So this is what we have here, and this is what we need to. It's more important to preserve this than ever, essentially.